What's the difference between forged and cast irons? And what is it about Japanese manufacturers specifically that makes them unique and much more expensive? Club fitter Chris Farley joins us here to tell us all about that. And we deep dive into some factory tours and we ask the question, did Tiger Woods actually play Miura irons at his peak? All that and more. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FLG Golf Podcast. We have a very special episode today, a special episode, not our typical interview. We have a special guest, but we are focusing and zeroing on a very specific topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. That is Japanese golf clubs, specifically Japanese golf irons. And with me today is regional custom fit trainer, senior sales advisor for American Golf, Europe's largest golf retailer, Chris Farley. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Hey, Marc. It's great to be back. Thanks for having me again, mate.
In our first interaction on this podcast, you were the guest of our second ever episode, and we go back much longer than that. We, of course, lived in Singapore together for many years, but now our Venn diagrams intersect once again. Not only our love of golf, but we actually play irons of the same brand. And this was the genesis for this idea of this podcast. Insert flashback from our previous episode.
I play a very sexy set of irons. I play Justin Rose inspired, by the way, Justin, if you're listening. The Honma.
Hey, Chris,
forged.
You know I play Honma blades, right?
There's the flashback. So yeah, we both play Honma irons.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
This is me. This is a blade. Now, let's not go into the fact that I shouldn't be playing blades because I'm a 13 handicap, but this is a staff model, PP117, and I can't even find information about this online. I'll post a picture of that, a high-res picture of that here rather than showing you the grainy, fuzzy video. I'll tell you the backstory of this one shortly. Let's see what you're working with, Chris.
I play the Honma forged TW757X. Yeah, yours is a true blade. Mine's what I would call a cavity back blade, but it's a modern cavity back blade. So just on the toe here, you might be able to make it out. It's got a little circle, and that's where they've forged in a 8-gram tungsten weight. Just having a cavity just means, you have a little bit more forgiveness. You get the center of gravity a little bit lower, which gives it a little bit more launch and spin. And mine are a little bit stronger lofted or modern lofted, the traditional pitching wedge being 46 degrees, mine's a 44 degree. So still blades, still forged, fantastic feel, which we're going to go into, but just a little bit more helpful than yours. Yours are punishing, Marc. I'm going to be honest. I also want to show you my 4-iron. So I go from a bladed cavity back 5-iron, and then my 4-iron, because of my strike quality is not tour standard, I need something a bit more helpful on the longer end. So I actually go for another Honma driving iron. This is the Honma T-World utility iron. Okay, so as you can see, it's kind of like a cavity back with, again, another tungsten weight in the toe there. But it's also a chunky boy. So this is basically borderline driving hybrid, but loads of weight at the bottom, big cavity, so it's very forgiving, and it's also in the same Japanese shaft, which is the Nippon NS Pro Modus. This is a 120, but I normally play a 105 stiff. And so I have Nippon shafts in mind. They're a Japanese manufacturer as well. I like to say that, Japanese firms, they stopped making samurai swords and now they make golf clubs. So it's a high launch, high spin shaft. I hit quite a low trajectory, but I've gone for a slightly heavier shaft in the same model to my irons, just to give me a bit more consistency with the strike, because it is a longer club being a utility driving iron. But both Honma.
So I want us to talk about Japanese irons in general. I want to talk about forged versus cast, because I guess when you think about Japanese clubs, like that is really the main difference is the forging process. There are a few major brands. There's a few things that I've found on the internet, which are factory tours of some of these forging facilities. And of course, that's Miura, that's Mizuno, that's Honma. Want to get to those. But first, why don't we talk about how we kind of wound up with these clubs? So let me do mine first, because I didn't choose my blades.
Go ahead.
My wife's father is an engineer, He's had a couple different professions in engineering, including semiconductor and manufacturing. And now he's a furniture designer, basically in his retirement. So his mind is attuned to design and innovation and manufacturing and simplicity. And he knows nothing about golf. And so, but he bought golf clubs as a gift for his clients. And the brand that he gravitated to was Honma, basically because he knew that they were forged steel. He understood, kind of that process, the history. There's a certain cachet when you talk about that manufacturing process, like you mentioned, the construction of samurai swords. They have been forging steel exceptionally for millennia, and it is treated like an art. It is a craft. It is something you spend your entire lifetime perfecting. And sort of understanding that, he bought these irons that are, not even really on the market anymore. And he gifted me one of the sets as a wedding present for me and Sherry. And God, I love them. But I can't hit a 3 or a 4 iron. And these are basically tour professional clubs. They have a very small margin for error. So as a 13 handicap, I not only have like a right and left miss, but now I have a lot more of a long and short miss, because if I pure one, it goes. And if I don't, it don't. But that's something I'm very willing to live with. And I don't even want to try other clubs, even though I know I should probably be playing something more forgiving, but these are very special to me. And as I've learned a lot more about the forging process from preparing to this discussion, boy, I'm even more in love with them now than I was before.
Yeah. Yeah. They're fantastic irons that you've got there. And like you said, being a blade, you have to find the middle. The sweet spot is very small and there's no help at all. And you've got to find a middle. If you find a middle, it'll go the same distance every time. The moment you're a bit toey, a bit heely, or a bit thin, it'll punish you, but it'll also give you fantastic feedback on where on the face you're striking it. And it's that middle feeling, Mark, that we chase though, isn't it? It's that pure feeling, which we'll talk about.
So you came by your Honmas honestly. You became a fitting instructor, and
yes,
you had the keys to the candy store, and you chose Honma. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, sure. So this is actually my second set of Japanese irons. So I now play Honma. I've been playing these irons for about 2 years now, maybe. And before these, I was playing a Mizuno JPX forged 900. They were a gift from my older brother. When I came back from Singapore, I came back with some really old pings, Ping S59s, I think. And they were good, they were doing me well. But I came back and my brother was like, you need a proper set of irons. And so out the blue, my brother, bless him, he bought me a set of Mizuno JPX forged 900s in an extra stiff shaft, because I was a bit bigger back then, as you knew me, and I was swinging fairly strong. And they were great. They were fantastic. And similar to any forged iron, when you found the middle, oh my God, it was fantastic. Like butter, you don't even feel the ball. And they gave me good feedback. They got me down to about single figures at the time. But then I found that, I'm not swinging as fast. I'm taking my time a bit more, and I don't want to chop a tree on every swing.
Mm-hmm.
And also I found that with the JPX forged 900s, they do have a bigger cavity and a little bit of help. They're more of a player's distance iron. And so I found that when I did find a middle, it was going a country mile. I think my one time me and my brother were hitting balls on the range, and I was hitting my 8 iron, 190. I was swinging fast, obviously, but that's too far.
Yeah.
And so came the time for me to assess my golf game and be like, look, I'm not swinging this fast anymore. I'm getting a couple of flyers. I want to learn more about my strike quality on the club face. And being a fitter, I had the run of the mill, in our bays at American Golf. We've got Ping, we've got Titleist, we've got Cobra, Ben Ross, Wilson, TaylorMade, Callaway, Mizuno. And 2 years ago, we also were fitting Honma. We subsequently stopped now because I don't think they could quite keep up with our demand, because we're a large retailer.
Yeah.
But we had Honma. And so I tried them all. But because I'd come off of a Mizuno forged iron, everything else just didn't feel as good. Every steel or carbon alloy, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, felt clicky and hard and loud, and the sound and the feel was off.
Yeah.
And so when I tried the Honmas, I was like, these feel even better. They're going to carry me to an even lower handicap, and they're going to give me a more consistent strike. I'm not going to get any flyers, and it's going to demand a better strike, which is what I need and wanted to continue to learn my handicap. So I also went from an extra stiff down to a stiff shaft. Now, there's a few small nuances about Japanese irons, which if you're okay with, I'll go into.
Before we do nuance, I
Hmm.
kind of want to just sort of take a bigger step back
Yeah,
and
sure.
and kind of share something that I have found that I think is probably the best explanation of really what's the difference? What's the difference between forged and cast, basically?
Sure.
And then we're going to come back to your specific experience, like feeling these clubs and working through these clubs. So what I want to walk through is really probably the most amazing video that I found, kind of just on just the very basics of this process. And there's two online. They're right from Mizuno Golf. Is the Mizuno Iron grain flow forging process. Now you may know more about this than I do, and then a little bit more inside the factory, making some specific Mizuno iron.
Yeah.
This is the video. So Mizuno Iron Grow. So it's called The Art of Forging, and it begins with just these awesome old classic pictures of
Yeah, love that.
of the
Love that
Mizuno. Like
picture.
it's grainy. You've got the sepia like inside old
Yeah.
bookshelves, the irons, and of course there were very few Japanese golf manufacturers until the 1950s, because the only golf clubs sold in Japan were like U.S. brands, and they didn't really have any fit for smaller, shorter Japanese players, and so that is actually one of the reasons why these brands they're known really well here in Asia, right? When you think Mizuno or Strixon,
Yeah.
there's a very different brand recognition elsewhere in the world. And this is a picture of the forging floor, and we'll see some factory tours later of
so
of
good.
Mizuno and,
Looks
and
so
the,
good.
the Miura factory. Like the forging machines technology has not changed, and actually has probably not changed the basics of this for thousands of years when they were making samurai swords. And then the interview, basically, this is the global director of R&D for Mizuno as of 13 years ago. But I want to talk about his background. If I can get my office to look like this, and
Yeah.
like in the back, if I can get like club heads, like a little neon light, my golf bag in the background, like this is peak stuff. Right now, I'm not showing my background because it's full of boxes following our move, but we'll get there. Aspirational. But he explains that really the biggest difference between the casting process and the forging process is that cast clubs are a liquid poured into a solid mold, right?
Yeah.
And that's how most mass manufacturers in the US and Europe are doing it. But in Japan, they are forging. So they are taking a solid object, heating it, and it's a solid when they smash it, basically, at high heat. So this is an example of basically the cookie cutter that comes out when they take a single, tiny rod of the material, steel, and they press it in a machine. Now, if you make golf clubs from that casting process, he says always there is some shrinkage, right? And
there's also another term for cast as well. So cast is also called hot metal because they're pouring the hot metal. So cast because it's a cast kind of outline, and also hot metal is the same as cast, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it changes that state from a liquid back to a solid, you get distortion. And then when it cools down, there are bubbles of air that are trapped in the product. So forging has no such things. So the structure is really tight, really consistent. And I think that's where you see this grain kind of in this detailed photo of the side angle of an iron.
Yeah.
Like this is what it will look like under a microscope, but you get fewer of those air bubbles in a forged iron. And this is, Luke Donald, he basically said, when he tries to test a golf club, obviously I'm looking at how a ball comes off the club face and how it actually feels through your hands. In Mizuno irons, there's no vibration throughout. So it feels like a sweet feeling. And that's what I heard over and over. It's the softness of the forged steel. And of course, Japanese video, you get Shinkansen trains. So they're there.
Yeah.
Had to show that.
Yeah. But there's kind of the statement that follows Mizuno around is nothing feels like a Mizuno. As you just said, there's a good reason for that. And that's mostly the forging process.
Yeah. What the other piece I want to go through is inside the factory tour. This is a really awesome video. So two guys talking about actually, these are the steel rods that they have. Basically different types of materials for different types of irons. And essentially this is the Mizuno factory. Super cool. Basically just looking at all the steel that's out there. And this is the press. It's a single, machine, basically just a big hammer. You take hot rods of the steel, heated to X temperature, and they're in there. And there's a guy whose basically job is to strike this thing 3 times. And in some places, like when we look at the Miura factory, you've got to work in the Miura factory for 25 years before they'll let you touch this thing. And on a specific range. And there are 5 steps to kind of how it comes out. Furthest down, you have your rod of steel. They kind of taper it a little bit in the first part of the process. They kind of bend it so that when it goes into the call it the press, and they smash it 3 times. So each time that they smash it, they're removing they're basically pressing it better and better each time. So you're getting a much tighter pack. No air bubbles, right? No flaws. And then you get this cookie cutter that eventually they cut out the head of the iron. They'll remove all the waste and they're left with the solid iron. And he's explaining that the Mizuno 243 iron,
Yeah.
and it's the model that probably where we push the technology the most, he says.
So the 241 is the modern day 2024-25 tour blade Mizuno iron, which is the equivalent to yours. It's a true blade, but it's tiny, it's thin. When they make it thinner, they get more deflection, more ball speed.
Yeah. The thinner the face, the more energy you can translate to the golf ball, the higher COR, actually, coefficient of restitution, which is basically the springiness, like the energy you can transfer from one solid to the golf ball. Increased ball speed, the deeper center of gravity eases the launching of the ball. And so those are the qualities that I think you're getting from at least this specific forged iron process. So I think that is a good foundation of forged versus cast. We can look at cast a little bit deeper in the pod, but that's, I think, where the great starting point from now.
If I could touch on some other benefits of forging as well, from a fitter's perspective as well, is that when you take a forged club versus a cast or hot metal club, you can take a forged club, and if you need to adjust the loft and like retro spec it or power spec it, or if you need to change the lie angle to, upright or flatter, with a forged iron, because it's so much stronger and there's no deviations or air bubbles in there, you can take the lie angle, 4 degrees down, 4 degrees up, let's say. But with a hot metal or a cast, it's much more rigid and it's much more restricted with which lie angles you can adapt it to. So most hot metal or cast irons, you can maybe 2 degrees is still pushing it because it's weaker, and so you're at risk of basically snapping it and causing catastrophic damage. So as a fitter, if I've got someone with forged irons that comes in and they need a lie angle tweak, or they need a loft change, or let's say over the years where they've been using them for years, suddenly, the lie angle's changed a bit. You've got way more wiggle room and adaptability to change the loft and the lie angle. So there's that factor as well.
Awesome.
I was also going to talk earlier about just the slight specifics of Japanese irons in general. And you touched on it earlier about, the Japanese market. It's a fact that in Asia and in Japan, the average height and arm length for length and lie angle is, they're a little bit shorter, and therefore they need their clubs just a little bit, 1/4 inch, I think, is the standard. So Japanese clubs come standard 1/4 inch shorter. And they also come around about 1/2 degree flatter as well. So a neutral lie angle in a Japanese iron is going to be a little bit flatter than, say, a Ping or a TaylorMade. And that's just because the height's a bit different, the arm length is a bit different, and where you hold the club relative to the floor is just going to sit a bit different. And so you often find that a lot of Japanese irons that come in are a little bit shorter and a little bit flatter. But again, if they're forged, you can change that. And then obviously, if you're in a fitting, you can try different lie angles, 1 degree up, 2 degrees up, etc., to counteract that as well. But
so
just a small little nuance there. Yeah.
So I'd like to understand how you tested yourself and eventually came through with the Japanese iron, but also like the types of golfers that you have eventually fit for a Japanese iron, and kind of why that's come about. Who has found that type of iron to be more appropriate for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came to fitting myself, and I would get warmed up with my irons and then make sure I hit, about 10 shots with my irons, make sure that on my launch monitor, I'm only selecting the shots that I'm really hitting well, because I want to fit for the best potential strike, because our handicap is our best potential score. Yes, there's going to be some mishits. You might keep a couple of those in, but any really bad shots you can remove and negate. And then I will choose different heads. And in my custom fit bay, we've got, each brand has got its own little section. And we'll choose let's say maybe I started with Ping, and I would choose a Ping head, something like the I-230, which is a similar sort of range. Nowadays, they have the Blueprint S, which is probably what I would have chosen if it was around 2 years ago. But you'll choose a Ping head, and then we can put it into a shaft, tighten it up, either through a screw or a nut system, and use a torque wrench to tighten it.
Do you prefer the screw or do you prefer the nut?
I mean, the nut, all of them are moved away from that now.
I'm seeing you up there.
Yeah, I know what you
Phil.
mean. I know. I see what you did there. The Hazy Jane hasn't quite kicked in yet. But no, it's actually a valid question, because Ping have a very unique system for how they wrench up their irons, or they used to, but they've subsequently moved away from that and they've gone into a screw. Callaway have just updated their custom fitting neck system. TaylorMade have an updated neck system fitting. Everything is a screw and a torque wrench for custom fitting now.
Yeah.
I was looking at cavity back blades, basically, is what I was looking at. Maybe a few players' cavity backs.
What's a cavity back blade then?
So a cavity back is literally what I've got here. You know, that's my iron there. And as you can see, like yours as a forged club would have all of this encased.
Yeah.
And yours is one larger piece of metal. Okay. So, you know, if you look at the top edge here, and from here to here, yours is much thicker than mine here.
Yeah.
Because yours is a true blade. Whereas mine, being a cavity back, has just got this little bit of extra cavity. You can see it here on the back. So you get a little bit more of COR and deflection at ball speed. And so the center of gravity is lower. You get higher launch, and it's just a little bit more forgiving. A lot of players nowadays even tour players will have split sets, and they'll go from pitching wedge to maybe a 7 or 8 iron in a true blade, and then 6, 5, 4 they'll have in a cavity back. Exactly, you know, the same model, but just the cavity back bladed version. And that's because just on the longer shots, like you mentioned earlier, that you don't really like your 4 or your 3 iron, we want a little bit more forgiveness. We want a little bit more spin. We want a bit more launch. And if the tour players are needing that, then we probably need even more help.
Yeah.
I hear everything, basically.
Why wouldn't you? You got all the time in the world.
Absolutely.
And
all
the cookies. Yeah.
It's, you know, I'm in a candy store and I want to taste every sweet there is. And so the issue I had when I was trying TaylorMade and Ping, not that they're bad irons, they were great, but I'm very much a feel type of player, and I like to feel it. And when you pure something that's forged, it feels better than a hot metal or a cast. So forging, any sort of brand forging, will feel better on a pure hit. The Japanese just do it differently, and they use a softer carbon alloy. So they use, we'll maybe talk about it later. I think Mizuno use a 1025 chromology carbon alloy, and it just means it's a little bit softer, you know, whereas Callaway might use a slightly harder carbon alloy. And there's pros and cons, there's trade-offs to each of those. A harder carbon alloy will wear longer. It won't knock up and have dent marks and scratch marks as much. But on the flip side, when you cure a softer carbon alloy, it feels like butter. And that's what it's tagline.
A lot more expensive. And we'll get into that as well. Like these clubs, these from the Japanese manufacturers, especially Honma, they are known for being expensive, almost like luxury items, you know, not just the design and sort of the rarity of how they manufacture these clubs, but just the quality of the steel that are going into these clubs. They're not making them for mass market production, which is why you don't see a lot of Honma or Mizuno players on tour, right? They're not paying these guys to advertise their clubs because they're not going to sell them on mass market. Honma they don't even keep stock of their clubs. Like they just do everything on custom order. So there's a difference when you are, you know, multi-generational, very private, family-owned company. Like you are making very different business decisions about your quality and your customer base and the breadth of far you want your clubs to reach, and therefore, you know, you're not going to be kind of known quite as well to the layman, to the average golfer.
Absolutely, and Honma, especially Honma, you know, Mizuno and Strixon are more factory made, and they have a very, very large production line because they're the 2 biggest manufacturers of Japanese clubs. Honma, specifically, and maybe a few other Japanese irons like Miura, they're handmade. There's a master club builder who's been doing it for 30 years, and he is hand building and hand forging your irons to a precision that the other manufacturers can't match in a large scale factory. So there's obviously that adds to the price. Honma specifically, they add, you know, when you start looking at their iron sets, they've got gold plated.
Oh God, they got, you know, platinum.
It goes up and up and up.
Yeah.
For me, the real price comes from the care taken into the craftsmanship and the care taken into the detail and building something with your hands and having a real human really, you know, make sure it's right from start to finish process. But for my fitting, I would hit each of those in kind of like a shaft that I thought was suitable for me. And then I'd narrow it down to like maybe the 3 ones that I felt were the best, but I wouldn't really be looking into the numbers too much. I would kind of choose the ones that either looked or felt the best. And then I'll narrow it down to 3 that I like the look and feel of, and that seemed to go okay. And then that's when I'll look at the launch monitor data. You know, I'm a fitter, so I look at everything from, you know, how consistent was my swing per shot. I'll start looking at my attack angles and even spin axis and a few other bits and pieces. But for me, living on the south coast of England, we get a lot of wind here. So I don't want it going too high. I don't want too much spin. I want it to be quite piercing. So, you know, it was an important factor. Whereas if you're playing in the US and there's no wind and the temperature's hot and you can fly it high and let it come down like a meteor, then you want, you know, excessive spin or a lot of spin. So it really depends golfer to golfer, what they're doing. Because if you get someone who's a corporate golfer and they pick up the golf clubs, say 3-4 times a year, that's all they're playing. You want a golf club that will work for them every time they pick them up.
Yeah.
But for me, I chose the head and the shaft and I was happy with those. And then I looked at the numbers and I was happy with the Hondas and they felt so great. The other options just didn't feel as good. Hondas felt buttery. And then it's a matter of just testing out the lie angle dynamically. So there's a couple of ways you can test out the lie angle dynamically. Some launch monitors can give you the swing data and the head data and strike data. And we're looking at how are we interacting with the turf and what sort of lie angle to help influence that ball flight. So, you know, for me, I'm about 1/2 degree flat. That's how I play it. So Honma suited me perfectly. I've got very long arms, so and long limbs. So, you know, the club length was absolutely fine for me. And the feel was amazing. The numbers added up. And that's how I landed up with my beloved Honma iron set.
So then someone coming in off the street, what's the type of golfer that might eventually, you know, we don't want to say that X golfer should have X clubs because it's a very personal choice and has a lot of factors to it, as you described.
Yeah.
But what were those journeys like that ended up in kind of choosing not only a forged iron, but a forged iron from a specific Japanese manufacturer?
I mean, I don't want to specify and kind of pen, you know, and like, you know, label people too much. Japanese clubs are still quite unknown to a lot of golfers, to be honest. Mizuno being the most known brand. Srixon is massive as well. There's some top players that play Srixon on tour, and there's some top players that play Mizuno on tour. But the type of golfer that usually chooses a Japanese club is someone that really has a huge weighting system to feel. You know, feel is a massive part of Japanese irons. And we're not even talking drivers and woods yet. It's more about irons, just to specify that.
Yeah.
Honma do make woods and irons, and so do Mizuno and Srixon, but we're talking about irons. So for Japanese irons, if someone's a real feel-based golfer and they like a soft feel, they don't like a clicky sound, because golfers, and even when I've gone to the Ping factory, I've gone to the TaylorMade factory, I've gone to the Titleist factory because of my job, a lot of them do say that there's a huge association with sound and feel. So if it sounds good, it feels good. But also with irons, it's a lot of it what goes through your hands in the grip. So a softer carbon alloy will just feel so buttery smooth versus a harder carbon alloy. And you know, like I'll use Callaway as an example, because they use a slightly harder carbon alloy. So theirs will feel very hard and clicky off the face compared to a Japanese iron. Look, someone may like that, and the numbers may without a doubt suit the Callaway, because they do make fantastic clubs. But if you work off a feel and you like a soft feel and a soft sound, then that's generally people who do go to Mizuno and such other Japanese brands. Now, Japanese irons are not cheap. You know, you're looking at Mizuno, a full set of, we talked about Mizuno MP or Mizuno Pro 243s earlier. A full set of those is not cheap. You're looking at 1,400 pounds, you know, 1,400, 1,500 pounds, which is a lot of money. So they are more expensive than other Western brands. Yes, they are more refined and they use a different carbon alloy and maybe a slightly different forging process. But also there's the shipping, and that's why a lot of the Japanese brands and Asian brands just focus on Asia. Yeah, because they can keep the cost down because they don't have to ship and import so many. Whereas in the West, we can get TaylorMade and Callaway and Ping and all these other Western brands for a little bit cheaper because there's lower import and shipping fees,
So,
etc. But
so if you part of your early consultation is just knowing what the budget is for a set of irons or clubs, does that mean that for some people you're just sort of automatically, even if you get to the forged iron as a possibility, you may already rule out a number of the Japanese brands already?
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, people, we're not made of money and we're not tour players and they're getting them for free. It's a big investment for a lot of people. Your average golfer, this is a big step for them to go for a customized set of irons in a custom fit. They want to get it right, but we can't blow their budget and we can't start offering them items which are way beyond their means. It's just not realistic. It's not fair for them. And you're teasing them and showing them something that they can't maybe necessarily afford right now. So a lot of people, if they tell me that their budget is X amount, I will then choose items that I know will fit their budget, because I don't want to blow their budget, and it's just not going to be fair on them.
Where do you actually tier these brands? Just generally how much they will cost, right? Not just Japanese brands, but like throw in those European and American manufacturers as well.
So you've got in Mizuno and Honma. Honma's way up there. Unfortunately, as I said, we've stopped fitting Honma because I don't think they could quite keep up with demand. But Mizuno are the most expensive irons in our bay. Titleist are probably the next most expensive. Let's say at £1,200 to £1,300 a set. But then Titleist still have that reputation of a players brand, right? Players clubs. But then I'd say you've got Ping and TaylorMade, about £1,100-1,200 a set. The Callaway, which are about the same. And then below that, you've got some very good quality irons, which are still very, very good in Cobra and Wilson. Wilson makes fantastic irons for the price. If you ever get the chance to try the new Wilson Staff CB blades, my God, they feel almost as close as a Japanese forged iron, almost. And they are a lot cheaper. And then you've got some other brands, you've got Tour Edge, and then you've also got a British brand that we fit called Ben Ross. They're fantastic as well. And they do everything from game improvement to blades. So, they are very affordable. And like here at American Golf, we can custom fit a full set of Ben Ross forged blades for £500.
Wow.
And that's a fantastic price. And this also depends, Mark, on how many irons you choose.
Yeah.
Do you play the full sand wedge up to 4 iron? Maybe, but a lot of golfers nowadays go from pitching wedge to 5. They get some standalone wedges, which are more purpose built for wedges and around the greens. And then instead of a 4 iron, they might get a 4 hybrid, or like me, a utility iron, or even a 5 wood, 7 wood, 9 wood. You've got like tour players using 7 and 9 woods. Dustin Johnson, Sahith Tigala, he uses a 9 wood, I believe. And so a lot of people are only going up to a 5 iron.
So all of these lines will have their typical cast, but then they will have forged also, right?
Yes, they do. Yeah. And it depends on the player, the budget, what type of golf you play. But there's the range, really. It is quite vast.
I want to use this price discussion to segue into something that I think is really worth sharing. And that's, we're talking more specific about Honma. Honma clubs, if you were to Google Honma, it comes up pretty quickly that they are crazy expensive. And this is not crazy expensive, but it's because it is really kind of a luxury brand as well. This is like if Louis Vuitton made football boots, right? Like
Balenciaga or something like that.
Yeah. Why are Honma so expensive? There's a few great videos online that I found about this. There was a fantastic one by Business Insider, and then Swingmaster actually took a lot of that material from those videos that Business Insider did, but added some detail around the edges. We get some great shots of Sakata, Japan, which is where the factories are. And there's kind of 4 key areas where they describe why Honma irons are so expensive. Number 1, they're forged, right? The process alone these are rarer clubs. They're forged from a single piece of steel instead of cast. But it's the Berez line they don't keep any stock, and every set is fully custom made and fully customizable. And it's at that part of the process where you get like the costs exploding, basically. It's the materials also, right? Unlike cheaper industrial steel that most golf club lines rely on, Honma goes the extra mile with special kinds of soft steel. But then they go the extra mile as well. They're putting in carbon fiber and gold and platinum. Like, these are not things that you necessarily need to get a good ball strike, but these are things that make these clubs extra rare. And one thing I didn't actually realize is how important shafts are to the Honma brand. Like, I think you in your fitting bays, you're mixing shafts and heads and grips, and you're basically making all these things. If you order Honma clubs from the manufacturer, they are making their own shafts, and they control every part of the manufacturing process.
They make their own shafts basically. So yeah.
And their tolerance levels are some of the lowest in the industry, which means they're discarding a ton of clubs and shafts when they're going through the manufacturing process. So they have very exacting standards, and they're one of the few manufacturers that actually craft all of their own shafts in-house. They're all hand rolled. So from start to finish in-house, that adds a lot. You're not outsourcing shafts to a Chinese manufacturer or a cheaper manufacturer, even stateside. And that acceptable margin of deviance for everything, it's controlled so tightly that you're automatically just it's much more expensive. But this image here is just like some of the detailing that goes into these shafts. Like these are pieces of art.
They are.
So you're no longer in just golf club space. You're now in art. And I can say from experience, like if I see someone on the golf course or in a driving range with Honma clubs or especially Miura clubs, it's hard not to just think, rich douchebag. And I know people are thinking of that when they see me pull out my Honma blades and like fucking shank one. But minor gift, right? I've got that excuse. You're a fitter, you've got your excuse, but it's very easy. You see it a lot more in Asia. People are choosing appearances a lot more. So it's become a status club, basically. The hefty price tag also, they're pricing them up even further to make them appeal more to a specific person. But you can drop $50K on a full set of clubs very easily.
Oh yeah.
In this line.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
They've got drivers that are plated in 24 karat gold. And that's actually when I've said, I play Honma blades, and like, oh, Honma, they make gold clubs and they're for idiots. And I was like, yeah, sure. But now I've actually got the ammo to have an intelligent conversation about Honma, the brand, the forged club making process, steel quality, etc. And then also like in Japan, this is sort of broadly more for all the Japanese manufacturers, like the work of an artist or a specialized designer is highly revered, more in the Japanese culture than any other culture in the world. Like to work on this Perez line, you have to be employed with Honma in Japan for 25 years to even touch this specific club. So that, that even adds to the allure, the price tag, like and that's how you wind up with, if you look at 2-star iron set from 7 to 10 sandwich for a ladies club, you're looking at €1,500 for that, for the ladies set. Just a driver alone, 3-star driver, €1,275. 4-star iron barrettes, this is their flagship line. So 5 through 11 iron and a sand and a pitching wedge, 13,000 plus. And the 5-star barrettes, you're looking at €43,000 for a 5 through 11 iron and 2 wedges.
I mean, it's
Absolutely
excessive.
bananas.
It's excessive, but like you said, they're appealing to a higher market, and they're handmade, hand painted with rare minerals and precious materials. And someone's going to love that, and someone's going to pay that.
Yeah. Not me. Not me. Yeah. Which is why, rich douchebag is not an unfair criticism when you see people playing those clubs. I mean, they are going to be lighter and they are going to be softer. But if you're a 15 handicap, what does that matter? Right? Like it doesn't, like you should be playing clubs from Costco. Get the Kirkland signature irons, and you probably aren't going to shave that many strokes. You're not going to add that many strokes overall.
You should be going for a fitting as well.
Yeah.
Go for a fitting.
You're right.
Your nearest fitting, your local fitting.
Shout out American Golf. What else do you want to touch on when it comes to whether it's forging or Japanese clubs specifically, or anything that we kind of glossed over before that you really want to hammer down?
One of the biggest statements that I could probably say is that in general, forged clubs do feel better, whether it's any brand. I know we've focused a lot on the Japanese market, and we're talking about Japanese clubs, and specifically Honma, but any forged club will feel better. Any forged club will give you more feedback. And any forged club will force you to strike a better ball. So, I think hot metal and cast is a very modern way of making golf clubs. But the way I think of forged clubs is literally like a blacksmith in the 1500s, just pounding down a hammer on a piece of steel for like 2 days to
Yeah.
forge it, make it stronger, stronger, stronger. And it's that forging process which gives its feel and performance. And I think if you've never tried forged clubs, you really should. Obviously make sure that they're right for your handicap. That's very paramount and important. So, you know, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, as we say. So, but I think it's worth trying because you might fall in love with that feeling of a forged iron. And it's those sorts of feelings as golfers that we fucking love. You know, that's why we fucking love golf.
So let's talk about the masters of forged irons, which is of course Miura.
Yes.
And this is a really awesome video that we found from Miura Golf. Have you seen this video?
I have, yes.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So Adam Scott visits the Miura factory on YouTube. First of all, we start with this beautiful setting. Like it's mosaics of golden and green fields in rural Japan, and it's tiny factory on a river. Yeah. And it's still run by Miura-san and his two sons. And Miura-san, he's over 80 years old. And I just love the aesthetic of this. Like, seen videos of, go to the Titleist factory, you go to the Ping TaylorMade factory, like they look nothing like this. This is just a going back in time, basically. And the machine that's forging, like this is the same machine that was in the Mizuno factory that we looked at earlier, right? Otani, same brand. And he's like, it's like you're going to see a steam powered train. You just don't see it.
Yeah, that's probably had a lot of use. Yeah.
So here's a bit about temperature. So they'll heat these steel rods to 1,100 degrees. And then they'll smash them 3 times, and then they'll keep them hot between 800 and 900 degrees. And this is partly how you're not getting that shrinkage basically that you get in that process. And what I thought was unique about this, that the other side of sort of factory tours on forging iron process didn't go into, is where the loft and the line angle and the offset are created is very unique. So most irons are, what's the glue that you put, the epoxy, right? So like an epoxy resin where you put the shaft into the shaft.
So you have a two material epoxy resin where you get like a hardener, and then you get the epoxy itself, and it hardens very fast. A lot of club fitters and club builders nowadays will actually put small tungsten beads in there as well, like very, very fine tungsten beads to help with the binding process.
So Miura have a special technique where they heat weld the hosel to the shaft. This is where you get an even greater feel. Like it's a one piece all the way up through your hands. Basically, you get that softness. I thought this was super cool. So Adam Scott's dad, Phil Scott, I didn't know was a former PGA professional. And he's like sharing a grinding wheel with his dad, who's touring this factory with him. And he's sitting there with Miura-san behind him, hand over his shoulder. And
that's cool. That's also what comes with the price in the territory. You're getting someone that, like, I think Honma do this to a certain degree with their forged blades, but they will hand grind them as well. Hand grind, hand polish them. And that's also, just to touch on another brand, that's why Titleist drivers are so expensive, is because all Titleist drivers are hand painted and hand finished. So, there's a lot of brands out there that take the care, and that's why you pay more for a certain brand and golf club. But this process is so old school. Look at that. Oh my God, I mean, this is so just good.
So there is it's just such a simple look. And I basically look at this when I look at my irons, like I'm seeing almost this exact same shape, and it's really aesthetically pleasing. But here's a little nugget that I thought was really interesting, and I'll need you to illuminate. What Adam Scott said was the thing that I was looking for, and why he chose Miura was a different sole design. Something that could perform in all kinds of grasses, right? And I think we've achieved that. And he says, I wanted to start playing around with the sole design of my irons because I noticed some performance difference on different types of grass. So he says, I felt it was worth flattening and widening the sole a little bit for a firmer type of grass, or Bermuda, even if it's firm, but also works on rye and bent, and it's very tight. So what's he playing around with here? And like, can you make sense of that to me and others listening that may not be familiar with that?
Yeah. So the sole is obviously very important on how it interacts with the turf. It depends on the firmness, the type of soil. Is it links? Is it parklands? Is it heathlands? Is it soft? Is it firm? Summer or winter? And then also, like Adam Scott alluded to, is what sort of grass are you playing on as well? So that can have a bit of an effect too. Now, bounce is very marginal, and I'll try and explain it on my 5-iron.
Yeah.
But my 5-iron doesn't have a lot of bounce. So Bounce is basically the difference between, and the difference in degrees between the sole and the leading edge. So here, like here and here, like is marginal, right? On a wedge, you can see it a little bit more. And bounces normally range from like 14 degrees being the highest bounce. In bunkers, a high bounce works well. And in softer soil, you want a higher bounce. In firmer soil, you want a lower bounce. So you literally will bounce it into that soil and that turf. If it's very tight, and very, very hard and compacted, the soil's not going to give that much. So you won't be able to bounce it that much. So you want a lower bounce.
Okay.
A lot of better players in their wedges will play a lower bounce wedge in firmer conditions and a higher bounce wedge in softer conditions. And Adam Scott has obviously gone to Honma, and they've given him the freedom to choose his bounce, his sole, his grind, not just for his wedges, but also for all of his irons. Now, he's not alone. Every tour player is doing that. And Vokey were probably the pioneers of bounce and grind. You've got some of the grinds from Vokey relate to golfers. You've got the K grind is from Tom Kite. You got the S grind is from Steve Stricker. The T grind now is the Tiger grind. And so, it's important you try and, see which one works best for you, which suits you and your game and your playing conditions. But for Adam Scott, he probably has so much freedom with that brand that he might not have had with other brands.
And that's exactly what he said. He said the first time that he basically started hitting the ball with his Miura irons, he knew that the sound and the feeling were there, basically that softness. And then they began to move forward and start to introduce other characteristics he liked. And just looking at some of these clubs, again, I love this. Like you talk about Japanese artistry, the craftsmanship of, making samurai swords, this imprint of the Miura-san.
That's
Miura
hand
logo.
painted as well.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I get to quote him one more time. We said we live in such a disposable world today. Anything that you have can be used and discarded. But after seeing that kind of process, I felt like with Miura, it's like you can use them forever. They're made for life. And I think that, that could probably, you could sort of say that about a lot of the forged irons as well, sort of.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be an FLG golf podcast, Chris, if we didn't do some style stars. And there's a few nuggets in this video that we're going to look at here. First of all, thought in Uniqlo in general. I mean, where are you with Uniqlo as a brand? Like I can say living in Asia.
Yeah, they're in the UK and Europe.
In North America, but in Asia, like everyone's wearing Uniqlo for everything from casual weekend wear to sports, but also like I have a Uniqlo blazer, right? That I wear at the office sometimes. And
I love Uniqlo. I think they're great. They make good quality and fairly affordable clothing and apparel. Like Uniqlo, being a Brit, obviously it's cold over here in England. And when I was away for 14 years overseas, which is, I talked about that in the previous podcast, but where I was away overseas in some hotter climates for 14 years, when I came back to England, I was cold, man. So I just wear Uniqlo underlayers, the heat tech from Uniqlo, the ultra warm stuff. I'm actually wearing it, right? This white top. This is a Uniqlo
t-shirt. I like that.
Yeah, I love it. So I really like it. It's good quality stuff.
Heat stuff, like in Asia, it's just hot as balls here. Like you're sweating all the time. Like I'll wear a Uniqlo Airism under my shirt. Like underwear on the golf course is that like our daughter, when she was born, like we couldn't find baby onesies that she wouldn't sweat in. And then we found the Uniqlo Airism baby. Amazing. But I mean, it is a mass market brand, right? And so they're not necessarily cutting edge in terms of style. And Uniqlo itself, while it does mean like unique clothing, that's kind of what they were going for. It's not loud. It's not flashy.
But I do like Adam Scott's like very simple color palettes. It's a lot of like sand and
it's a lot of
colors.
Tans. Yeah, he's basically bringing khaki back from the 90s where it should have died, in my opinion. I'm not sure how you are on the sock thing here though. So Adam Scott is wearing kind of a high ankle white sock with a white shoe.
It's gonna be
personally,
some tan lines,
I would go like ankle socks with this one.
However, I was just having this conversation this morning with a guy I was playing golf with, and I've been on golf courses where if you don't wear those socks, you're not allowed to play. If
Which
you wear
one's this?
ankle socks,
Yeah.
if you wear like trainer socks in England on some golf courses, you're not allowed to play. You have to wear proper socks.
You're not
they
talking
will-
like the knee highs. I've seen some courses that
No,
make
no,
you wear
no.
knee highs, but you have to wear call them
Just
crew
regular,
socks, right?
just regular socks. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna bring that down a little bit there.
Yeah.
You have to wear those sort of socks that Adam Scott is wearing there. If you're not wearing those sort of socks and you're wearing the ankle line, the ankle like below the ankle socks, like you're not allowed to play. So
Fascinating.
it depends. It could be because that's why he's wearing them, because he wants to be, playing by the rules and tradition.
All right, fine. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt here. I don't like the Uniqlo very much is sort of this like olive green belt sort of thing with the olive green pant, but I'm not certain olive green and royal blue go all together. I'm not ranking this one highly. How about you?
No, there's a bit of a clash. I'm a fan of olive green. I think the blue is
It's in.
That looks
I love it. I love olive green
Yeah.
and black right now. It's super nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
J&L just came out with a nice polo shirt that we're selling, which is olive green and black, and I'm buying one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean Jay Lindbergh?
Jay Lindbergh. Yeah, I call it
Oh,
J&L,
nice.
but Jay Lindbergh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I love Jay Lindbergh. This I like a lot. It's sort of a cream crew neck hoodie and a gray polo underneath. Like, I don't really
they fit
love
him so well also.
Yeah.
Like they do fit him. He's like a mannequin, this guy.
Yeah. And like kudos honestly to Adam Scott, who's well into his 40s and he's still playing on the President's Cups and he's a major champion, obviously, but for one of the older guys, he's still playing extremely good golf.
Yeah, like him and Justin Rose. Justin Rose is 44. And also Justin Rose, what used to be sponsored by Honma too. That's part of the reason why I went to Honma as well.
I don't love crew necks, to be honest. Like, I think if you're wearing a polo, you've got to have a V-neck. I'm just not there with crew necks.
No, I'm okay with crew necks. I like a crew neck. I think that looks great. I think it looks great.
All right. We crank up the Wayback Machine here. We get some great photos of Adam Scott in sort of a very Tiger-esque Nike shot here on the right. But this Wilson sort of high crown, just this is pure gold. I don't even know where to begin with this. Like the thick stripe, this thick horizontal stripe. Would you ever wear anything? You were ever caught in one of these as a kid?
Probably.
Like Adam on the right here is how I dressed in the 90s and early 2000s. Like baggy polo, kind of baggy-ish pant, thin belt, and like a crisp Nike hat with a really, really deep bend in the visor. Like it was basically 1997, 98 when I started playing golf. And I got a black Nike hat, and from Marks and Spencer, I got a red long sleeve polo. And like, that's what I wore to play golf. I wore Tiger's 97 Masters Sunday look to play golf when I played. But this is Adam and his dad. Wearing
That's cool.
matching ensemble here. I love that. The mustache is near and dear to my heart here on his dad. But I'm looking at this hat, and it's a Chicago Bulls hat, and it's kind of got the pinwheel pattern on the top. It is not appropriate for golf. I am sorry. His dad should have never allowed this.
No, and another rule in England, by the way, I don't know if it's the same anywhere else in the world, but in England, you're not allowed to wear football team shirts.
Yeah.
So even if you're wearing a polo shirt with like Man United on it, you're not allowed to wear that.
Yeah.
Even if it's a very nice polo shirt or like a Man United hat, like this is at the top tier courses.
Yeah.
So I got to say there, he was probably a very good player at that age, but I'd say no, Chicago Bulls hat, not appropriate to the golf course.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to wear a golf brand, but it shouldn't be just a totally different sport, I would say.
Yeah.
Under rare circumstances. There is one more thing on Miura that I do want to go into that kind of just sort of follows on through the factory tours. There's a guy named Eric Anders Lang who's done he's amazing. And it's incredible how long he's been doing this, because this was 6 years ago that he went to the Miura factory.
I love Random Golf Club. I'm a subscriber to that Random Golf Club. I get their emails. I watch all of his stuff. I think he's a great dude.
And when he was doing Adventures in Golf on the Scratch TV channel, which was owned by the PGA Tour, which was their sort of first foray into sort of online media or YouTube golf, he did this video where he went to the Miura factory and he did an awesome tour of Japan. And this was the nugget that I really wanted to talk about. So Miura manufactured a limited set of irons for Titleist to commemorate Tiger Woods' 97 Masters victory. Wow. But why would they make 500 of these. The question
Why?
is, did they actually manufacture the irons that Tiger Woods actually used? This is the rumor, that Miura are actually the ones who made Tiger Woods' irons when he was first coming out and throughout his peak years, but that they just had the Titleist brand on them. And he asked Miura-san this question directly, and his answer was, well, that's not something that we discuss often. What Tiger Woods has, we deliver some different types of golf clubs to Titleist in Japan. What we create, we receive orders from Titleist Japan, but we don't know where those clubs are going from there.
So
And
I've heard this
all you
too.
get. That's all you get from Miura-san.
I believe that when Tiger was at his best and his prime, playing Titleist blades, I believe they were Miura clubs. Yes, I do believe they.
He asked one of his other sons. He says, "I have heard that rumor too," and then
Ha 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 ha. Yes.
And then the other one
of
says,
course.
the other son, well, if he did, that would make me very happy. Chris, these are non-denial denials.
Yes, they are.
This
Yeah,
is
I agree.
this is the most honorable that you could do. They're doing a very good job of it. It's practice, it's polished, but God, it doesn't do anything to
They're very
dissuade
respectful to
that
Titleist.
actually-
They're very respectful to Titleist, and they don't want to ruin their relationship with
Absolutely.
Titleist, obviously.
And they probably
But-
have it contractually that they could never admit this anyway. Chris, do you have anything else to add before I send us home with one really, really awesome thing that I found on the internet?
No, just to tell the people out there, just go play golf, man. Just go get out there, get on some grass, touch some grass, take a few divots, lose a few balls, have some fun, and surround yourself with some good people and some fresh air. That's what I'm going to say.
Solid. So we're going to end this pod. We're going to give a special shout out to someone that we found online that I'm desperate to have this person on the podcast. It's Burl's Art on YouTube, also on Instagram.
Yes.
He made golf clubs out of cans and copper wire. And this
Yeah.
kind of gives a little bit of insight into what we've talked about forging. This relates to casting, right? What's the casting process? How does that actually happen? If we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into forging, let's give casting its fair shot in terms of explaining how it's done, right? So, but we'll do it from the perspective of basically a novice manufacturer, or actually he's quite professional, incredible what he did. But he's taking a old Mizuno blade iron and he's building a mold out of wax, making his first mold here. Ton of air bubbles you see in that process, right? Which is a problem from going solid to liquid. Eventually he's getting better and better molds, doing this a dozen times. And then mixing it's a basic copper wire and other iron materials. And beer cans, which I love. It's perfect for this show.
Yeah.
He's got all the tools to kind of melt this, pouring molten metal, coming
Look at
out with
that.
these really awesome, actually
Raw
really
finish.
awesome molds.
It's really raw.
The coloring is really cool. But once he gets them polished, and he actually had to grind down the grooves, which I think in a casting process, it gives a little bit of an idea of there's only so much tolerance you can do in a casting process compared to actually stamping and forging, right? But look at how nicely these things come out in the
Wow.
finish. And he slaps the shafts back on them. So he takes them to the range, and he's got a TrackMan set up. And so he's going to get hard data on this, on the two new irons that he's built, and the replicas basically, versus the original clubs that he's hitting. So what he found from the bronze and copper that he made, they're lighter. So he's getting a little bit more club head speed and a little bit more spin. But overall, he's getting kind of less carry, less distance. And
I mean, you look at the bottom. It doesn't talk about his attack angles there, but he's just getting more dynamic loft. I'd love to see his swing path and face to path ratio to make sure that he's swinging them the same. Even though he's swinging it 4 miles an hour faster, he's losing 16 miles an hour, which is a lot of 16 yards.
16 yards, yeah. As you're kind of expecting with a homemade iron, the hosel flies off, and he has to get someone from the range to go out there and get it. But he then takes him out onto the actual course and hit some beauties, like a 5-iron, 175 yards, to sticking a pin, really impressive stuff. Burl's Art, give us a shout. I would love to talk to you about this process.
The fact that this dude can literally just make his own irons out of a mold and then just go and play them. I'd love to chat with that guy and find out how they felt.
Chris, where can the people find you, and what's coming up next for you?
So you can still find me on Instagram at _Charlie_Farley_. What's coming up next for me? Just more golf, man. Just love it. Summer's approaching.
Summer's
you can see
coming.
the sun's on my face, and there's no more frozen greens here in England.
Yeah.
Season's approaching. I intend to play a lot of golf this year, but no, just playing golf, living life, enjoying the sun whilst it's here. And yeah, happy to be on the podcast again.
Awesome. Keep it up. Look forward to having you back.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks for watching the FLG Golf Podcast. Subscribe to come on this journey with us. If you want to watch another full episode, click here. If you want to watch a playlist of our best of each full episode, click here.